Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So, here's a question for you. Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is that people who achieve so much tend to be kind of quiet and humble about it? What do you suppose that's all about? I mean, obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but why do you think people that achieve a lot don't scream and shout about it as much as, say, people who haven't achieved nearly as much? You ever notice how, oftentimes people that have really accomplished something with their lives, they're not super quick to advertise it? A perfect example, my grandfather. My grandfather won a scholarship to Cornell University back in the day. Pretty impressive in and of itself. That, by itself, something that a lot of people will never get anywhere near. And then he went into the military. During the Second World War, he became a naval aviator. He flew planes during the Second World War. He had boxes full of medals that he never showed anybody in the family. But he was shot down behind enemy lines at Iwo Jima. My grandfather did this one tremendously difficult thing, and I think it was because he won an engineering scholarship to Cornell University that he was able to kind of figure this one out. But my grandfather once, in a dogfight, had one of his engines shot out. Now, imagine how difficult people flying commercial aircraft in the year 2018 talk about landing being. Now, go back to World War II, trying to land in the middle of the South Pacific on an aircraft carrier while people are shooting at you. Now, have one of your engines shot out. So, my grandfather figured out that to approach the landing on this aircraft carrier, he would have to be a certain number of degrees to one side or another. Clearly, math, aviation, not my strong suit. Otherwise, I'd be able to tell you a lot better than this. And then he realized if he was off by even a little bit, he had to go around for another approach. But he could only turn in one direction because one of his engines had been shot out. Now, my grandfather didn't tell this story willingly. It was just something that he did. And I remember I heard about it from my mom, and I badgered him until eventually one day I heard the story. And it was incredible. It was amazing. It was insane. But he never talked about that sort of thing. He never brought out the box of medals that he got. And genuinely, I don't think they meant very much to him. He was just doing what he was called upon by his country to do during a very difficult situation. And then he came home. And worked his way up until he was head of a department at Kodak in Rochester, New York. And, just sort of lived an amazing yet somewhat humble life. Had a wife who sadly was sick a lot and eventually passed away of cancer. And raised a gang of kids at the same time. And lived in a house, much of which he built with his bare hands. And, I never once heard the guy brag. I remember once he told me he realized early on in life he was more comfortable around the little shots than the big shots. But he had done so incredibly much. It was insane. It was insane that he would never scream and shout about his accomplishments or his achievements. Same goes for my other grandfather. My other grandfather was a bit of a captain of industry. Came to America from England to run a company. Reckitt and Coleman. He ran Reckitt and Coleman, the folks behind French's Mustard. You like the mustard? You're welcome. My grandfather had something to do with that. Anyway, he never really talked about his achievements. He'd gotten scholarships. He'd gotten a first at Oxford, meaning he graduated first in his class from Oxford University. And then he was part of British intelligence, planned the storming of the beaches at Normandy. And these two guys, these are the ones that always come up in my mind. when I think about how I want to go through life. I will never achieve even a teeny tiny fraction of what they achieved. But I think the things they're most proud of, or the most things they're most proud of in their life were their families, their kids, the times they spent being happy around the dinner table. That was the only time I ever really saw them swell with any kind of pride. When they were around their grandchildren, when they were around family, when they were kind of looking at the life that they'd built. And then there was an internal sort of pride. They never said, look how great I am. I'm the patriarch of this family. They just kind of enjoyed it. So question for you. Why do people that don't necessarily achieve so much feel like they need to scream and shout about how valuable they are when there's men like that who have walked the earth? What made me think all this? Honestly, the folks over at CNN. We'll get into it next.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So again, I'll ask you the question, why do you think people that achieve so much seem to talk about it so little? People with every reason to trumpet their glittering list of achievements from the highest mountaintop around oftentimes aren't really the trumpeting types. I mean, we talked about my grandparents. My grandfathers on both sides were military heroes, yet I never once heard them tell a story. You really had to kind of coax it out of them if you wanted to hear some of their incredible World War II stories about being naval aviators, getting shot down behind enemy lines, storming the beaches at Normandy, being part of British intelligence. This is all like pretty impressive stuff, but they're just no big deal to them. Or if it was a big deal to them, they certainly didn't let people know that. And I find that to be true more often than not. I mean, look, there's obvious exceptions of people being really great and wanting to tell the world they're really great. I suppose Muhammad Ali, arguably at the time the greatest fighter in the world, loved to run around saying, I'm the greatest of all time, I'm the greatest of all time. And there's a very good chance that he was. Howard Stern. Howard Stern's a guy that, well, it's so much fun. It's interesting. Back in the day when Howard Stern was starting out, Howard Stern was a guy who a lot of people were ripping off left, right, and center. And Howard would get mad at it, being like, these people are ripping me off. These uncreative competitors of mine have nothing to offer, so they're just ripping off my bits. They're ripping off my shtick. They're ripping off what I do. And maybe that was why he became a big self-proclaimer of his talent. And he certainly had the numbers and the ratings and success to back it up. And now it's not like anybody's ripping off Howard Stern. Me, everybody else that does something even vaguely similar to what I do, it's not like we're ripping off Stern. It's like we are living in a world that he created. It goes so far beyond taking his ideas. We're just in a world of his creation, and all of us do what we do because he basically laid the foundation, did all the groundwork, did all the heavy lifting. So guys like me could do stuff like this and kind of vaguely pay rent with it. That's all because of him. And he would tell people he was the greatest of all time. So there are some notable exceptions. But generally speaking, folks with massive achievements, folks with an awful lot to crow about, seem to be the ones that do the least crowing. As opposed to people that don't necessarily really have a leg to stand on, they seem to yak about their achievements an awful lot. You know what I learned when I first started in radio and in entertainment, and just, I guess, generally speaking, I learned that, and this goes back before radio, this goes back to when I was in a band. Generally speaking, I'm a pretty independent, do-it-yourself type of individual. I guess I have some punk rock roots that come from the DIY community, and I would rather just handle my business on my own. But I realized early on that having a manager, having an agent, there's a reason why you have people like this. Because if I was to go to a record label saying, I'm the greatest of all time, you really got to listen to my demo. It's freaking fantastic. It sort of came off as desperate. But when my manager who'd managed a bunch of really big artists in the past, said exactly the same thing to record labels. They went, "Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. I'm curious to know. Let's take a listen." Oh, yeah. And I realized something. I realized that if you have to explain your value to somebody, your value drops significantly. And so I think that's part of the reason why perhaps I come from a background of not self-aggrandizing. Not only have I had it beat into me by watching folks like my grandfathers go through life that nobody likes to show off, but also I found that it sort of, well, it goes against your success in the long run if you scream and shout about how great you are all the time. If you scream and shout at all, it just comes across as a scotch desperate. I really kind of felt like during the presidential debates, a guy who really could have possibly succeeded in out-trumping Trump was Rand Paul. But do you remember? Man, he was screaming and shouting a lot, and somehow, in the face of Trump's unflappability, that just came across as hyperactive and a little bit desperate. And I was like, there went that. The moment you scream and shout about how right you are and how wrong everybody else is in that way, it kind of makes you look smaller, weaker. I don't know. I do know this, though. You see this time and time again. That, well, often people that don't have a lot to scream about are the ones that are going to scream about how great they are. When I first started in talk radio, this was antithetical to everything that I believed about radio and entertainment. But I'd been told to listen to some other talk radio guys, and some other talk radio guys do, in sort of a Kanye Westy type of way, trumpet about their achievements and how brilliant and whatnot they are. And I tried it for a little bit. I didn't like it. Don't do this stuff right. It's not a good color on me. I'm not Muhammad Ali. I'm not Kanye West. I'm not, one of those people that can aggrandize themselves and really mean it. So I don't do it. But the reason I bring all of this up, like I was telling you before, is because of CNN. And because of there's this article CNN ran. And look, I will be the first to say that journalists have their place in American society, and the press has its place in American society, and it's a vital place. But the pedestal that the folks over at CNN seem to have put themselves on with this particular article was really a head scratcher to me. What are we talking about? We'll get into it next.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, I'll give you another great example of people that have accomplished so much. People that have every reason to shout about their accomplishments and their achievements and their bravery and their courage and all of the above from the rooftops who don't. I've met a couple of firemen in my time. I don't know if you know any, but the ones I met were humble to a fault. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, I was staying at a hotel in Houston. If you're listening in Houston on KPRC, I was staying that hotel, the Marriott, up in the Woodlands, the one right across the way from Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion. We put on our summer show there, the big roast concert. It was an awesome time. The guys in Blue October played. The guys in AWOL Nation and Theory of a Dead Man played. It was great. Oh, there's this guy, Robert DeLong, who's on the bill. Man, if you ever get a chance to see Robert DeLong live, please do me a favor and take it. That character. You know that character that Dick Van Dyke played, I think in Mary Poppins, the guy with a one-man band, one of those old-timey dudes with like a harmonica strapped around his neck and a bass drum on his back that he operates by kicking things and playing guitar and singing. The one-man band concept, that's exactly what this guy Robert DeLong is. He's a digital 2018 version of a one-man band. The guys basically made a career out of doing giant bong rips at home and going, how can I get my Nintendo Wii controller to make music? And he uses it as MIDI triggers in a really clever and interesting way. It's just, man, it is mesmerizing. If you get a chance to see Robert DeLong play live, take it. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that I was staying at this hotel. If you're in or from Houston or the Woodlands, you know about this. The Marriott actually connects to the venue, Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion, via a walkway. So a lot of us, when we're working an all-day thing out there, sometimes get a room there, and I was one of those folks that got a room there. So before this show, I'm at the gym, and there's this guy working out there. And he's got this bristling handlebar mustache, and he's heavily tattooed. And we get talking because we're rotating in and out of the squat rack or something like that together. And I was like, are you in one of the bands that's playing today? And he's like, oh, no, I'm a fireman. And I was like, oh, no kidding. He's like, yeah, my wife, one of the bands playing, Blue October, means absolutely everything to her. So we drove in from Austin. This is going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. And I just can't wait to see the look on my wife's face when they play. She's been such a huge fan for so long. I was like, wow, that's a beautiful and awesome thing. He's like, oh, man, we're going to have some fun. And I was like, well, first and foremost, thank you for your service as a fireman. You risk your life as a daily part of your job. Thank you. And he was like, oh, man. And this is where he could have said, yeah, boy, do I take some risks. And yeah, you appear to work for the radio station. Maybe you could give me some special treatment. As many people often do that are not firemen. People are always asking for special treatment. He was humble to a fault. He's like, my job is so great. It's so much fun. Thank you. And, well, I was just struck by it. I was like, by the way, with the tattoos and the incredible handlebar mustache, you had to either be a fireman or one of the guys in the band. He's like, yeah, I guess that sort of makes sense. When I was a club DJ in New York City, there's this guy, Joe, that used to be security at the door. Huge guy. And a tremendously nice guy. Now, whenever there's trouble, he was the first to deal with it. But a lot of the time, just the fact that he was there meant there wasn't trouble. This dude's enormous, and anybody that was thinking of starting some stuff in any of the bars or clubs or places where I DJ'd when he was there would, know not to. He could handle himself and about 10 other people if he wanted to. And he was a fireman. And so I was like, anything that you do professionally, dude, is there anything that you do, I asked him, that doesn't involve risk or bodily harm? He was like, I guess I like the excitement. I was like, look, you're a New York City fireman. And he'd been a New York City fireman during 9/11. And when I found out he was a fireman, I was like, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do. He was like, oh man, you got to be kidding me. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, my job is interesting. Both firemen said the same thing, which makes me wonder about the psychological profile of a person that would fight fires for a living. But both of them said, my job is so much fun. But Joe, I actually talked to about it. I was like, what do you mean fun? I mean, rewarding, perhaps. Maybe you have a calling, but fun? How is charging into a fire fun? And he's like, well, that part is exciting. That part's not necessarily fun, but it's very exciting. He's like, the fun part is this. I was like, oh yeah, go on. He said, you ever saved a life? I was like, no, I have not. I've never saved a life. He was like, I have. I was like, I believe it. He was like, that's fun. I was like, fun? He was like, fun doesn't do it justice, but it's one of the most incredible feelings I have ever had. Saved a life. Incredible. Amazing. He had every reason to go, I'm a hero. Because naturally, he was. He is. But he just described being a hero, being a saver of lives, as fun. He said he was tremendously lucky to do what he did because there is no other feeling like saving a life. Something that you, me, lots of us will probably never know. Hopefully, we never have to know it. Unless we signed up to be lifesavers, unless you're a doctor or an EMT or someone whose job it is to save a life, a fireman or something of that nature. Hopefully we never have to figure out what it is to save a life. Whatever the case may be. Like I said, these guys had absolutely every reason to go, yeah, totally, I'm a hero. But did they? Hell no. No, they did not. And I bring all this up. All this talk of heroes and how they seem to be reticent to talk about their achievements. And by the way, if you're like me, you know plenty of veterans like this. You thank them for their service and, well, they just kind of sort of bashfully go, oh, it's my pleasure, my honor, or I really appreciate that. More often than not lately, when I thank a member of our military for their service, they tell me how much they appreciate my appreciation. I guess it's a little thin on the ground. So if you get an opportunity to thank a veteran, thank a member of our military, thank a military family member, well, please just go ahead and do it. Because like I said, the gratitude that they don't seem to expect, they don't do it for the gratitude, but the gratitude that they deserve is, well, a little bit more few and far between than it should be in America. Anyways, like I said, the reason I bring all of this up is because of what some folks over at CNN said. There's an article that the folks at CNN ran where they compared their journalists to the military. This is a direct quote. They said, "We thank soldiers for their service, because they devote themselves to protecting our freedoms, and we should." Okay, no problem with that so far. But we should also thank the media for the same reason, especially when the stakes have never been higher. Okay. Remember how I was saying that when I was a guy in a band, I learned that a manager or an agent or someone like that was useful because if you've got to tell someone what your value is, your value immediately drops. Well, the value of journalism in the eyes of what CNN just put out there on this one dropped tremendously. When you say something as obnoxious as what we do is important, like what soldiers do, oh, man. You couldn't have done less for journalistic integrity and the place of the press in today's society. And look, if you're like me, you respect the press. It's funny because, I guess I'm kind of part of the media, part of the press, something of that nature, but I never really think of myself as that. I guess I kind of consider myself to be, I don't know, just a goof off, maybe more of an entertainer than anything else. I'm not, but I suppose when it comes right down to it, I'm a member of the news media. But if I'm a member of the news media, you know what? We are important. We are hardworking. We are a vital part of how society functions when done right. And man, the media has a hard way to go at the moment. And I look to the press, I look to reporters, I look to people with journalistic integrity to bring me a point of view. I figure that point of view might enlighten my own if there's a journalist who's working from the right place in their heart, whether I agree with them or not, whether they're just delivering fact after fact or whether they're editorializing and taking a side. The press, journalism, how we get the information that we get is vitally important in today's society. I will be the first to say that. However, and by the way, this reminds me, do you remember when we were on the show and we were kind of going over the background of Mike Pence, and we realized that the vice president of these United States of America was sort of like one-of-me, a talk radio guy at one point? Mike Pence described himself as Rush Limbaugh on decaf in his talk radio career. And I went, oh, no. The people like me, talk radio guys, we shouldn't be allowed to have positions of authority and power. We shouldn't be the second in line to have a finger on the button. I've never met Mike Pence before, but what I know about other people in talk radio does not make me feel good about this. Anyways, like I said, journalists, the media, reporters, the press, it is a vital piece of what makes our society and how the world continues to turn in 2018. And you know what? The press has had a hard way to go, and in many ways, the press has deserved it of late when they get beaten up. But the way to adequately demonstrate your importance, your vitality, the level to which you are necessary for society to function, is not to go, we're really important. You're not paying attention. We're really important. Hey, you're thanking all those soldiers. Why don't you thank us too? What planet are you on? You're not doing yourself any freaking favors by running this article. The hell are you thinking? I don't think you were thinking. Anyways, this piece This piece at CNN.com comes from Joseph Holt, who is, I guess, in addition to being a journalist and ethics professor at the University of Notre Dame, Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. Right. Yeah. So basically, you're telling me, you're equating Jim Acosta. You're equating Jim Acosta yelling questions from the comfort of the White House press briefing room at Sarah Sanders with the actions of our military. Maybe take a walk down the street. Maybe go to Walter Reed Military Hospital. Maybe go to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Maybe see young men and women cut down very early in their life. Folks that have lost limbs. Folks that have lost eyes. Folks that have lost large parts of their cognitive functions. Folks that are brain damaged. Folks that have sustained injuries that they'll never recover from. Maybe go visit some of those folks. Maybe visit those folks, see what they've done, see what they've been through, and then get back to me on the comparison between the press and the military. As vital as I think the press are, let's have a sense of perspective here. Because what CNN have essentially done, and let's just gloss over the fact that this is tremendously insulting to those kids at Walter Reed, to those kids at Bethesda Naval that you could walk down the street and meet face to face, so you could understand. You could understand the level of their service and the level of their sacrifice before you compare it to a journalist. Let's just make this clear. Like I said, he's equating Jim Acosta yelling questions from the comfort of the White House press briefing room at Sarah Sanders. He's comparing that with U.S. soldiers in places like Afghanistan, in firefights, pinned down in a valley with bullets and RPGs whizzing past them. He's comparing those people that are driven by such a sense of duty, such a calling, that they're willing to sign up for the eventuality of death in order to protect us and all of our freedoms. He's comparing those people that are willing to make wives widows, husbands widowers, and children orphans for the sake of all of us, with someone that's desperately trying to live tweet a president's press conference in the hopes that it might go viral. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Makes total sense.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock nobody better than me. Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you a musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock nobody better than me.
So, did you hear which female celebrity recently went on the record? And this is a very recognizable and in many ways influential person. But did you hear which female celebrity recently went on the record saying that women who come forward with Me Too allegations look weak? It's so unbelievably wrong. And I know it's wrong, but if there's one person that gets it in their head that maybe coming forward in these situations does make you look weak, and they listen to this show, I want to beat that notion down to the point where it never comes back, which is why we're going to talk about it a little later on in the show. You know, it's interesting. I've been told by the people that sort of gather the data on these things that as a whole, this show has significantly more female listeners than other talk radio shows. Most talk radio shows tend to be completely male dominated. And look, there, I think, is a vastly male audience that listens to this show, but there's more females listening than the vast majority of other talk radio programs. And for that reason, especially, I feel a bit of a sense of duty to clarify this particular situation. Anyways, who are we talking about? What exactly did they say? We'll get into that in just a little bit. Right now, though, I thought I'd dig into some of your questions. You've been sending me a lot of these recently, and this has actually become kind of a nifty part of the show. If you have questions, queries, things that you want to talk about, gripes, things that you want to know, holler at your boy and let me know. At ADSXC is where you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me, ad@iheartradio.com. I get this one a lot. What advice do you have for someone that wants to go into radio, and how did you get into radio? Well, there's a good chance you might have heard me tell this story before, so I'll make it brief. I got into radio sort of through the back door, and really out of desperation more than anything else. I was in this band. You and I talked about this a lot. I was in this band. We had this massive record deal, and then, well, it was kind of over and done with. The band kind of broke up while we were still signed to Sony, and you know what? I could not hold it against the other band members for wanting to go their own ways. They had fantastic opportunities, but it left me in a rather odd spot where I was like, what do I do? I'm a guy in my early 20s. My resume says guy in a band, and I don't even have a band anymore. I've been living out of a tour bus and in vans and in hotel rooms for a long time. I have no useful, applicable skills that make me good at anything. What do I do? And one of my really good friends in New York City had been the morning guy at a radio station in Houston called The Buzz, where I have worked for now the last coming up on 15 years. But I was like, hey man, I want to get out of New York City. There's one of me on every corner. I'll never be able to get arrested. There's some guy that used to be in some band everywhere trying to get jobs in media. And I know I'm going to do something media related because that's all I know and understand. But I'm going to go to Houston, where you used to be the morning guy, because I love Texas. I love the people there. It's significantly easier on the wallet to live there, yet it's still a very media-driven town. What should I do? And he was like, oh, be on the radio. It's easy. And he helped me make a demo that made me sound like him, like I'd had a career and history in radio and was actually good at it. I was not, I did not, and I had not. But it allowed me to fake the funk a little bit. And I had my foot in the door in more than one way, just because this band I'd been in, we were marginally successful. And both my program director at the station in Houston, The Buzz that hired me and gave me my first job, and my program director on Octane, that was my first station on Sirius XM. I used to be the morning guy on Alt Nation, and I did some time as a morning guy on Octane as well. But overnights on Octane, that was my first job. And both program directors, who weirdly enough hired me on the same day, both program directors had played my old band on the radio. So they kind of had a little bit of history with me, and that was like my foot in the door. And well, I mean, I had this demo that made me sound like I was good. So I got one lousy shift a week, like one crappy overnight shift a week on both of these stations, and kind of have been attempting to weasel my way up for, I said, like the last 15 years. But if you are not just coming off of a big record deal in a band that completely underperformed, but gained you a little bit of useful notoriety in the world of media, if you're not in that situation, the best way to get into radio, if you're in college, get an internship. Now, I don't know what you're going to college to study, but if you're going to college to study something, man, there's people that would disagree with me on this one, but I've never set foot in a college classroom, certainly never to study radio. And I'm one of the more listened to radio personalities in America. One of my program directors told me the other day that I'm the most listened to afternoon guy in all of alternative rock or something like that. And my point is not to impress you, but to impress upon you that you don't necessarily need to take a broadcasting class to understand how to broadcast. That might have been the case in the past. It's way less technical than it used to be. You used to have to be able to edit cassette tape and cut cassette tape up with razor blades so you could play phone calls back on the air. You really had to be a bit of a radio operator to be able to be on the radio. Now it's like operating your iTunes playlist and talking occasionally. The skill set is a different one, and it's much less technically involved. So I don't know what they're teaching in radio schools and broadcasting schools now. I'm sure it would be a great way to get yourself an internship, but I would make your major something really useful, like business. Don't quote me on that because I don't know if business is actually a useful major, but I would, if you're in college and you desperately want to be in radio, do whatever you can to get an internship at any TV or radio station in town and get the real world experience of being there, because ultimately that's what's going to give you your break. That's what gave me my break. If your break is getting your foot in the door because you're an intern and you're just around when somebody else gets sick or doesn't show up for their job and that's what happens, well, that's sort of what happened with me. I got one lousy weekend shift a week and, like I said, weaseled my way up from there. But the weaseling part was just sort of being there when somebody else got sick or couldn't make it in or what have you. I would get put in the game. And, well, that's a great way to do that, by becoming an intern and getting real life experience and learning from people that are doing the job right now, because it changes and moves very, very quickly. So if you're learning from someone in college that was in radio 5-10 years ago, chances are it's a very different world that we're in now. If you're not in college, apply for a job in the promotions department at every radio station in town. Turnover in promotions, it's a little higher than other departments, so it tends to be a good way in. And like I said, once you're in, that's where you just bide your time, say yes to everything, be useful to everyone as much as you can, and wait for your shot to be, well, woefully underpaid, but completely professionally satisfied. There you go. Now you know. That's how you get a job in radio. Does that make sense?
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The Dumbing Up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So, I got to tell you, one of the greatest emails I've ever gotten, one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten, came from a listener. I think it was somebody that listens on Real Radio 104.1 in Orlando, Florida. But I got this email from a listener, a father who had a teenage daughter. And he wrote me this really nice letter saying, hey, I'm a dad. I love my daughter more than anything. But she's 18 or whatever it was, and she's at an age where, well, she's questioning an awful lot. And she's very politically aware and completely disagrees with everything I think politically. And this has actually led to some tense moments, some arguments, and some real distance between us. And I hate that. I have to tell you that listening to your show together, though, is one of the things that we can agree on. And, well, we both love your show, and we both really enjoy listening to it, and it sparked some great discussions and conversations between us. So it's brought me and my daughter closer together when we listen. Thank you so much. And for me, man, that's a game over moment. The idea that I could bring people of differing viewpoints together that's all I really want to do on this show. You don't have to agree with each other, but if you can understand why someone believes what they believe, you can, well, maybe understand their situation, maybe even learn something from them. That's my fondest wish for this show, I suppose. But the idea that I could bring family members together that disagreed and give them something to bond over, man, that's literally, like I said, that's a game over moment. In a George Bushian sort of way, mission accomplished. But it also made me remember, and this is a bit of a weird thing for a talk radio program, that there was at least one teenage girl listening. Look, the vast majority of talk radio audiences are completely male-dominated and a little bit older. And I know from program directors that run the stations where this show is on that, well, I do well with women in a way that other talk radio shows don't. And the idea that there's a young woman in the audience, even if it's just the one, but if it's more than that, well, when I hear about this one female celebrity, incredibly high-profile female celebrity who recently said that women who come forward with Me Too allegations look weak, I honestly feel a bit of a sense of responsibility to smack this notion down completely and utterly. So we're going to get into this in just a little bit. Which female celebrity said women look weak when they come forward with Me Too allegations, and how are the many ways in which she is wrong? We'll get into all of this in just a little bit. Right now, though, I wanted to answer a couple more of your questions, specifically this one because it gives me an opportunity to share some great music with somebody. I got a question, and you can do that too. Hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at ADSXE, or you can email me ad@iheartradio.com. This is a good one. What kind of music do you like to listen to after a bad breakup? Well, if you ask me, there's only one man that can get you through a breakup. The high times, the low times, and all the times in between. That's when this guy's music is good. That's when this guy's music comes into play, when you're living that human existence. Literally every moment of your life, this guy has written a soundtrack to it. He's unbelievably brilliant, but especially sadness in relationships, especially breakups, especially not being able to get over what could have been or what was. That would be my man, Tom Waits. Oh my gosh. Get the Early Years Volume 2. Let it wash over you. Tom Waits, The Early Years Volume 2 is, man, that's an album that I love so much, but I actually don't listen to all that often. I'll tell you why. The reason I love it as much as I do and don't listen to it so often is because I never want it to lose its newness, its freshness, its specialness, its emotional impact. I always want it to hit me like a ton of bricks when I need to be hit by music like a ton of bricks. So I hold off on listening to Tom Waits' The Early Years Volume 2 too often. And I don't think it's on that one, but if you're looking for music to listen to after a lousy breakup or any breakup whatsoever, you can't go wrong, like I said with Tom Waits, but listen to Martha. Listen to the song Martha and feel the feelings. Let them just wash over you like a cleansing bath. It's unbelievable. Even if you were the person that ended the relationship, I guarantee you listen to Martha by Tom Waits, you'll be in tears and you'll want to call that person that is no longer in your life. And you know what? This is a healthy thing to do. Feeling the feelings, going through them, doing the emotional work. This is a thing, and the right music can help you do that. And Tom Waits, my friend, trust me on this one, is absolutely the right music. All right, then, we'll get into this female who said that women look weak when they come forward with Me Too allegations in just a little bit. Right now, though, let's take a look at the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. According to scientists, did you see this? According to scientists, apparently, there's a negative emotion that can actually keep you healthy. Yeah, everyone's always trying to be so up and pumped sort of stuff, but apparently there's one negative emotion that can keep you healthy. This has been in the news this week. According to doctors, this could actually help you live longer when you feel this negative emotion. It's disgust. Yeah, a new study says that disgust can help you stay healthy. Oh, a feeling of disgust helps keep you healthy? Well, I got to tell you, after this Met season, I'm going to live for freaking ever. Did you hear what new Facebook feature Mark Zuckerberg says he's really excited about? Mark Zuckerberg, creator of Facebook, says if it works the way it's supposed to, it could potentially change the world, potentially change your life. What exactly is it? Mark Zuckerberg is all excited because Facebook has added this dating feature. Yeah, there's a dating feature. Facebook is now also a dating website. Facebook has this thing. If ever anyone is making any money on the internet doing anything, well, they want to overpower it quickly. So I guess he's looking to become the next dating website as well, because there's good dollars in that. Sure, Mark Zuckerberg. Because if there's an expert on finding the right one for you, getting sweet lovin', if there's someone whose relationship advice you want to take, if there's someone who you want to help you out with the opposite sex, it's definitely Mark Zuckerberg, a guy who dresses like a 12-year-old boy. What's your secret to attracting a potential mate, Mark Zuckerberg? Oh, be a billionaire? Oh, okay. Did you see which wrestler is now a politician? Yes, he threw his hat in the political ring, ran a successful campaign, and he won himself an election. Who are we talking about? WWE wrestler Kane. Yeah, WWE wrestler Kane won a mayoral race in Tennessee, and people like him so much as a politician, there's now talk that he might be part of a presidential ticket in the year 2020. Now, I think that's a little far-fetched, but it's 2018. The guy who's in the White House, his candidacy was a running gag for the previous 12 years, so you never know. WWE wrestler Kane won a mayoral race in Tennessee, and now people like him for the presidential ticket in 2020. He must be so proud. He's a pro wrestler. It's got to be one of the first things he's ever won that wasn't predetermined. You know, say what you want to say about the idea of wrestlers being politicians, but I think wrestlers could be very successful at this. I think most wrestlers would probably make great politicians. Mostly because, well, they've got years of experience saying stuff on TV that is not true. Did you, this is an interesting one. Did you hear which superstar athlete is getting into the documentary filmmaking business? Are you a fan of this guy? Would you be interested in seeing a movie this guy makes? Who is he? Which athlete do you feel would want to make documentary films? No, not Tom Brady. Definitely not Rob Gronkowski. LeBron James. Yeah. At King James on Twitter. I think that's his handle. LeBron James is creating a documentary series for the folks over at Showtime. It's expected to be really, really good. Just not as good as any documentary created by Michael Jordan. Did you hear which, and if you're in Florida, if you're one of the people that listen on our affiliates in Florida, you probably know the answer to this one, but did you hear which unusual animal Florida residents are eating? Yeah, apparently the population of this particular animal in Florida is out of control, so it's been a regular fixture at summer cookouts in Florida. And, you know, to people not in Florida that are not privy to what's going on, it's odd because this is an animal that you might go see at the zoo to marvel at. And, well, people are apparently just scarfing them down. Apparently they don't taste bad. Florida residents have been eating iguanas to cut down on their population. Apparently Florida residents have been eating iguanas to cut down on their population. Yeah. Florida has an iguana problem. You know, a reptile dysfunction. That was cold-blooded. Okay. No more reptile jokes or puns. I should really try and scale back. All right. Okay. I want to make sure we have time to talk about this. So, who do you suppose that is? Who do you suppose the female celebrity is that went on the record saying that women who come forward with the Me Too allegations look weak? I'm convinced she can't do it. She just can't. Lindsay Lohan simply cannot go a single calendar year without doing or saying something unbelievably and profoundly stupid. It's just not in her DNA. And she took care of that in 2018 in a recent interview with a British newspaper when they asked her about the Me Too movement. She said, quote, "If it happens at that moment, you discuss it at that moment. You make it a real thing by making it a police report." So far, nothing disastrous. "I'm going to really hate myself for saying this," she continued, "but I think women speaking against all these things, it makes them look weak when they are very strong women." Okay. That's just, like I said, I'm aware that I'm privileged in the world of talk radio to have a larger female audience than a lot of other talk radio programs. And, well, because of that, I got to tell you, I feel a certain amount of duty and responsibility, especially knowing that there are younger teenage girls that listen to this show, as I know from some of the mail I've gotten. This will never make you look weak. Coming forward with a Me Too allegation, coming forward and doing what's right, will never be the wrong thing to do. It will never be an act of weakness. It will be an act of courage. And I'm sorry Lindsay Lohan feels that way. And I'm not going to give her a hard way to go, because that would defeat the point in this situation. Just what she said is so tremendously misguidedly wrong that it's important to call it out without any humor, without any jocularity, without making a whole bunch of super obvious Lindsay Lohan jokes of the variety we've made on this show in the past many, many times. It's just so unbelievably profoundly wrong that someone could ever say standing up for yourself makes you look weak. There's a reason. There is a reason why women for years and years felt like they couldn't stand up for themselves. And that reason is they felt threatened. And you know what? Women, I'm sure, still do feel threatened. I'm not a woman. I don't know anything about being a woman because I'm a guy. There's no way I could possibly relate to what a woman goes through every single day of her life that I will never understand because of the fact that I was born a male. However, I can tell you this, though. The reason women haven't come forward in the past was because it was scary. It was frightening. There was a prospect of being mislabeled, ridiculed, outcast, called a troublemaker, all of the above. And to overcome all of this, it took bravery. It took real bravery in the face of this for women to start coming forward and say, "Me too." Which is the exact polar opposite of weakness. Thank you so much.